Tonight, after 3 decades on the lam, film director Roman Polanski is arrested in Switzerland and faces extradition to the U.S. on child sex abuse charges. I'm Nancy Cordes. Also tonight, Iran claims a successful short-range missile test, while the U.S. steps up the pressure for inspection of its nuclear facilities.
If we don't get the answers that we are expecting and the changes in behavior that we're looking for, then we will work with our partners to move toward sanctions.
Pregnant women weigh the risk of taking part in tests of the H1N1 flu vaccine. And high achiever, an exclusive talk with a unique climber as he nears the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
Good evening. Russ Mitchell is off tonight. He is one of the most acclaimed movie directors of our time, and for the past 31 years, he has also been a fugitive from American justice. Now, Roman Polanski is under arrest in Switzerland and facing extradition to the United States for having had sex in 1977 with a 13-year-old girl. Ben Tracy has our report tonight.
You know what happens to nosy fellows? Huh? No?
He became famous as the director of such classics as Chinatown and Rosemary's Baby. But ever since 1978, Roman Polanski has been infamous for having sex with a 13-year-old girl and fleeing the United States. The 76-year-old director was arrested Saturday in Switzerland on his way to the Zurich Film Festival. He may now be extradited back to the U.S.
He was a fugitive. Well, now he's no longer a fugitive. He was arrested pursuant to a warrant issued probably over 3 decades ago.
Polanski has lived in his native France for those past 3 decades, where authorities would not arrest him. He continued his work, garnering a Best Director Oscar for his 2002 movie, The Pianist. If brought back to the U.S. now, he may face time behind bars.
I think it's likely that he's going to spend time in prison. He won't get the maximum that he might have gotten 30 years ago, but I think he will get a significant prison time.
Polanski's life has often made headlines. He was married to actress Sharon Tate when she was murdered by followers of Charles Manson in 1969. It was 8 years later that the director was accused of drugging and raping the 13-year-old girl he was photographing. He pled guilty to unlawful sexual intercourse in 1978 and was sent to prison for 42 days of evaluation. He fled the country when the judge tried to renege on a plea bargain. He talked to 60 Minutes about it in 1978.
You ran away, Roman. You ran away.
Well, I, as you say, ran away because I think that I was very unfortunate to have a judge who misused justice.
The judge is now dead, and even Polanski's victim has asked that the charges be dropped.
I've had a long time to get over it, and I wouldn't want to carry hard feelings around with me for my whole life.
Meanwhile, the director's friends are outraged by his arrest.
I'm ashamed to be Swiss, that Swiss is doing such a thing to a brilliant, fantastic genius.
Polanski has usually been careful not to travel to countries that may send him back to the United States. But last week, when the L.A. District Attorney's Office learned he was traveling to Zurich, they sent a warrant for his arrest, and Swiss authorities agreed to follow it. Nancy?
Ben Tracy in Los Angeles tonight. Ben, thank you. We turn next to the showdown with Iran over its nuclear program. Iran test-fired several short-range missiles today and said it plans to test medium and long-range missiles over the next 24 hours. The tests come just days before the U.S. is set to hold its first direct negotiations with Iran in 30 years. Kimberly Dozier has the latest from Washington tonight.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard launched the volley of rockets and even showed off a new multiple rocket launcher. They called the tests proof the country's ready for any attack after Western powers accused Iran of plotting to build nuclear weapons at a secret facility. It was a reminder that Iranian missiles, some with ranges up to 1,200 miles, can reach U.S. warships and U.S. allies in the region. The U.S., Britain, and France said Friday Iran is building the secret plant beneath a mountain near the holy city of Qom. Iran's president insists the plant is for civilian use. The U.S. says Tehran must prove it at a meeting in Geneva on Thursday.
We don't believe that they can present convincing evidence that it's only for peaceful purposes.
The International Atomic Energy Agency has demanded to inspect the site. Iranian officials have said yes, but won't say when. The U.S. says that's not acceptable.
And if we don't get the answers that we are expecting and the changes in behavior that we're looking for, then we will work with our partners to move toward sanctions.
The key to tougher sanctions will be UN Security Council members Russia and China. White House officials believe the Russian president is willing after a briefing by President Obama. He said if there's no cooperation, other mechanisms need to be activated. U.S. defense officials say military action remains an option, but a strike would not stop Iran's weapons development.
The reality is there is no military option that does anything more than buy time.
And it would almost certainly mean sending in U.S. troops to reach the sites.
You'd have to have a ground operation as well as a military operation, and that's very difficult to do.
The challenge for the six world powers is to convince Iran that it's in its interests economically to give up any plan it may have had of building nuclear weapons. It's worth noting that today's missile tests were planned in advance of last week's revelations, but Iran has used them to send a message that it won't be pushed around. Nancy?
Kimberly Dozier at the White House tonight. Thank you. Turning now to the war in Afghanistan, the Western allies today reported the death of 6 NATO troops, including 2 Americans killed in southern Afghanistan yesterday. While the Obama administration weighs sending more troops, Mandy Clark in Afghanistan has more on the challenges U.S. commanders face in trying to train the Afghans to take over their own security.
This is what U.S. commanders in Afghanistan fear the most, a weak Afghan police force. In cell phone video obtained by CBS News, police are seen surrendering their weapons and ammunition to the Taliban.
Could be cowardness.
The Ministry of Interior spokesman Zamarai Bashiri says the incident is under investigation. He says the tape is authentic but doesn't tell the whole story. These scenes took place after a fierce firefight where 2 police were killed and 3 wounded.
They were scared. In order to be protected, they submitted whatever they had with them.
The performance of Afghan national security forces is crucial to the new strategy here. There will never be enough American boots on the ground to mount an effective counterinsurgency campaign in this mountainous and vast country. The new U.S. plan relies heavily on boosting numbers of Afghan forces.
The plan commanders here have sent to Washington would see police numbers double, from 78,000 to 160,000 by next year, along with a bolstered army. That would be a total of 400,000 Afghans in uniform.
But numbers alone will not win this war. The whole force needs more training, and every officer needs to believe that they are a part of the new Afghanistan, and it's worth fighting for. Mandy Clark, CBS News, Kabul.
In the Philippines, the toll of dead and missing from a typhoon reached at least 106 today. The government declared a, quote, state of calamity, and U.S. troops pitched in to help deal with flooding on the main island of Luzon from the heaviest rainfall there in 40 years. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, Barbra Streisand singing again in the club that knew her when. Embattled New York Governor David Paterson dug in his heels today in the face of White House pressure to quit the 2010 election. As Hari Srinivasan reports, a routine photo op last week barely disguises the rift between the president and his fellow Democrat in Albany.
The handshake between President Obama and New York Governor David Paterson was an awkward one at best, considering last week's leaks that the White House wants Paterson not to run for election next year.
The only people I answer to are the people of my state. I'm not hurting my party.
On NBC's Meet the Press, Paterson said the president himself has not told him to drop out, but he gets the message.
I'm blind, but I'm not oblivious.
Governor Paterson, legally blind since birth, is used to challenges.
I apologize to the public, whom I promised better.
Especially since ascending to the office after Eliot Spitzer's sex scandal-driven resignation.
I, David A. Paterson, do solemnly swear.
During Paterson's 18 months in office, he has had to cut $30 billion in state spending and preside over a cantankerous legislature. He has also appointed a relative unknown to replace Hillary Clinton in the U.S. Senate.
Current Congresswoman Kirsten Gillibrand.
His approval rating has plunged from 57% a year ago to 17%.
He was unelected. The economy has been a lot of problems. There's been very little in the way of leadership out of the governor's office.
Patterson's ability to hold the governorship next year is not the only issue for Democrats. Also vulnerable in New York are a freshman senator, part of their filibuster-proof majority, and 6 Democratic freshmen in the House of Representatives.
He would be the head of the ticket, and there's a lot of down-ballot races that the White House has lots of concerns about.
It is a topic now parodied on late-night TV.
He's the busiest man in the world. And yet he took time to bully me, a fellow black Democrat. That's like the Pope calling a local priest to tell him to go to hell.
The awkwardness even has politicians keeping quiet.
I'm not commenting on Governor Patterson.
While the governor believes in his candidacy against all odds.
You fight hard and you win. And that's what I'm going to try to do in New York. That's what I'm going to do in New York.
Hari Srinivasan, CBS News, New York.
Conservative New York Times columnist and Pulitzer Prize winner William Safire, who famously coined the phrase nattering nabobs of negativism, died today of cancer. Safire was a speechwriter in the Nixon White House. He also wrote novels and the On Language column in the New York Times Magazine from 1979 until this month. In 2006, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The first doses of swine flu vaccine go out the door in a little more than a week, and federal officials are hoping that more than half the U.S. population will eventually get inoculated. In the meantime, they're racing to set up a database of side effects so they can spot potential problems quickly if there are any. And one brave group of women has volunteered to go first to make sure the vaccine is safe for mothers and their unborn babies. Erin Mahoney's family and friends didn't exactly understand her decision.
A lot of people were a little nervous.
Mahoney is expecting her second child, but chose to enroll in a clinical trial for the H1N1 vaccine, a trial specifically for pregnant women.
I saw no reason to be nervous about getting the vaccine now. 1, 2, 3.
Breanne Buchanan felt the same way.
I think the benefits of receiving the vaccine now and possibly not getting swine flu is much greater than the risk of this vaccine.
Their flu risk is frightening. Pregnant women make up 1% of the general population, but 5% of the flu deaths. And their risk of hospitalization is 4 times higher. Which is why Buchanan, who is 7 months pregnant, agreed to be a guinea pig, even though she knows that all new vaccines can carry some risk.
I feel like flu vaccines are well researched and well used, so I feel very comfortable getting a new flu vaccine.
Clinical trials like this one are rare. Drugs and vaccines aren't often tested on pregnant women.
There's real concerns about the safety of medications for the development of the fetus. Many will remember the thalidomide disaster.
Thalidomide was given in the 1950s and 60s to prevent morning sickness, but caused birth defects in more than 10,000 children. Then in 1976, 25 Americans died and hundreds were paralyzed after getting shots for an earlier form of swine flu. More recently, some women have worried about mercury-based thimerosal in vaccines. While some of the H1N1 vaccine stock will contain the additive, other doses, like the ones in this trial, do not.
We know for many, many years now of giving sort of seasonal influenza vaccination that there really isn't a concern for risk during pregnancy.
And doctors say the vaccine may be the only protection newborns have against the disease. Still, for many expectant moms who've sworn off everything from soda to sushi, getting the vaccine may cause a little anxiety. But not for Breanne Buchanan or her husband.
He has wanted me to somehow sneak some out of Duke testing. So this is a much more legal way of doing it.
Up to 120 women will participate in the trials, and they're definitely not in it for the money. They're only getting about $180 each. Coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, a one-of-a-kind climber who's on the verge of conquering Kilimanjaro. Updating now the inspiring story we reported last week. Paraplegic climber Chris Waddell is poised tonight to make a record-breaking final push to the summit of Africa's highest mountain. Karen Brown has an exclusive interview with him from his mountain camp.
Using his arms and his will, Chris Waddell finally has the top of Mount Kilimanjaro in his sights. He's climbed to 15,000 feet and spoke to CBS News via satellite phone from his final staging area.
How hard has this mountain pushed you?
How hard? It's pushed me really pretty hard, actually. Harder than I guess I hoped.
Waddell is trying to become the first paraplegic to summit on his own power. He's using this highly engineered four-wheel mountain bike that he showed us his final training day in Colorado.
I've climbed up a lot of things that I just thought, no way, I'm not going to be able to do that.
But the critical push to the 19,340-foot summit starts early Monday. He has 4,000 vertical feet to climb. The rocks will be loose, the temperatures below freezing. He'll have to use a winch to pedal up a rope for any chance of traction.
The winch is one big concern. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work.
Originally, the final push was slated for 10 hours.
It could take about 20 hours. We might end up sleeping in the crater tomorrow night.
Waddell is the top Paralympic skier of all time. This climb has been his toughest challenge yet.
The mountain's throwing everything at me.
Day one, Waddell climbs 3,000 vertical feet in 7.5 hours. Expedition porters use boards to help him tackle the deep drainage ditches in the path. Day two is brutal. Waddell pedals for 10.5 hours to rise 3,300 feet in a dust storm. Day three, he covers nearly 10 miles.
It was really, really tough and steep and loose and rocky.
What drives Waddell? His desire that the world stop seeing the wheelchair and notice the man.
I want them to see the possibilities of me and people like me, but I also want them to see the possibilities of themselves.
And whether he summits or not, once Waddell is down off the mountain, his foundation, One Revolution, will be donating custom-made wheelchairs to several Tanzanians. He says for him, that part of his trip is just as important as the climb. Nancy?
Karen, what an inspiring story. Thank you so much. And we are covering his journey on our website at cbsnews.com. Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, an inside look at last night's exclusive Barbra Streisand concert.
Someone happy.
Millions of fans on Tuesday will be able to listen to Barbra Streisand's first album in 5 years. But last night, the singer, who can sell out huge arenas, went back to the beginning to perform at a hole-in-the-wall club in New York's Greenwich Village. Bianca Solorzano takes us inside.
Make someone happy.
On the list of rare musical moments, this was one to remember.
Someone happy.
Barbra Streisand singing soothing melodies at New York's historic jazz club, the Village Vanguard. An intimate and a rare moment for the 67-year-old megastar. The club only holds 123 people. Invited guests included VIP celebrities. Others were fans who came from around the world, lucky enough to win one of the 74 lottery passes.
Unbelievably excited. This is the best thing that has ever happened to me.
Saturday night's concert was the first time Streisand sang at the Basement Club in nearly 5 decades. Lorraine Gordon, whose husband Max opened the Village Vanguard nearly 75 years ago, remembers the night in 1961 when a 19-year-old Streisand stepped into the club's spotlight, opening for legendary Miles Davis. But she wanted more.
She was persistent, and Max asked Miles would he perhaps accompany her, play for her a number. Well, if you knew Miles the way I know Miles, I don't play for no girls.
Streisand's performance here that night was good enough to land her a week-long spot at Gordon's other club, the Blue Angel, and the rest is history. Her talent has made her one of entertainment's biggest stars, selling more than 71 million albums, taking to the Broadway stage, and acting in more than a dozen films. Success, which she has often used to advance social and political causes. But as Streisand told her audience, she remembers that this tiny stage, which she joked is too small to provoke her famous stage fright, is where her remarkable journey began.
Back to where I started. Yes, to life.
Streisand's 12-song set included many old-time favorites like The Way We Were and Funny Valentine, but the highlight were samples from her new album.
May all your storms be weathered.
One special night where a star was close enough to touch everyone's hearts. Bianca Solorzano, CBS News, New York.
To life.
Talk about a golden ticket. That's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Nancy Cordes for CBS News in New York. Harry Smith will be here tomorrow evening. For now, good night.